The tenant bulletin had my stall number in bold, but the hallway photo attached to it wasn't even ours. By lunchtime, vendors were already stepping around my counter like somebody had reported a gas leak. Denise kept measuring the tape lines outside the east corridor, while the bakery racks stayed parked in the west hallway untouched. Nobody explained why our stall suddenly became the safety problem. A catering client emailed asking whether we were still under review, and even the delivery drivers started unloading farther away from us. The strange part was that none of the rules sounded completely fake. The hallway really did get crowded during lunch rush. But later that afternoon, I noticed the blocked service exit near the west corridor still hadn't been cleared either. The first sign something had shifted inside the market was the newsletter, not the complaint itself. Complaints happened all the time in Harbor Square Market. Somebody always thought another vendor's music was too loud, or their hand truck blocked the service ramp too long. Most of it died in committee folders nobody opened twice. But Tuesday morning, I unlocked my stall and found a folded tenant bulletin sitting beside the register with a yellow sticky note attached to the front. Please review before lunch rush. Denise. I set my keys down and unfolded it while the rice cooker warmed behind me. New safety concerns. Regarding East Hall obstructions. Halfway down the page, my stall number appeared in bold. Steam equipment, delivery congestion, repeated hallway narrowing during peak occupancy. There was no violation notice attached, no inspection report, just language careful enough to sound official if you skimmed it fast. My cousin Ava came in carrying 2 produce crates against her hip. Why do you look like somebody doubled the rent? I slid the paper across the counter. She read the paragraph once. This is about us. Apparently, that hallway's wider than the bakery side. I looked out through the half-open gate into the corridor. The bakery had 2 rolling racks sitting outside already. Nobody had taped notices to theirs. Morning, Mr. Shu called from the tea stall across from mine. He usually stopped for a coffee before opening. That morning, he only lifted 2 fingers without slowing down. By 11:30, the lunch line wrapped past the pillar near the loading corridor. I kept moving trays, wiping steam off the sneeze guard, restocking drinks. Every few minutes, somebody glanced at the folded bulletin near the register. Not customers, vendors. A woman from the soap kiosk came over carrying a clipboard she didn't seem to need. You probably just want to keep your carts tighter today, she said quietly. We already do. She nodded too quickly. Right. Of course. I'm just saying Denise has been walking around with the fire diagrams. Then she left before I answered. Around noon, Denise finally appeared herself. Cream blazer, tenant association badge clipped near her shoulder like she worked for the city, instead of a volunteer board that argued about hallway paint twice a month. She stopped beside my delivery cart and checked the clearance tape on the floor. You're about 4 inches over the line here. We're unloading for lunch. I understand. That's why I'm reminding you early. Her voice stayed calm enough that 2 customers nearby probably thought she was helping me. I moved the cart back without arguing. She watched me do it, thanked me, then continued down the corridor toward the butcher counter. Ava waited until Denise disappeared around the corner. She's doing this on purpose. Maybe. You don't believe that. I stacked takeout containers harder than I meant to. One slid sideways and hit the floor near the soup warmer. A customer bent to help me pick it up before I could get there. "You okay?" he asked. "Just busy." But the market felt different by then. Not openly hostile. Worse than that, careful. People kept stepping around the stall like they didn't want to get caught standing there too long. At 1:15, my phone buzzed with an email notification from Bayside Financial Catering. Before confirming Thursday delivery, we wanted to ask whether the reported safety review involving your stall is likely to affect operations. No accusation, no cancellation. Just enough distance to make me reread the sentence twice. Ava was sealing noodle bowls beside me. What now? I turned the phone face down on the counter and started wiping condensation off the drink cooler with a towel that was already damp. Nothing, I said. We just need to keep the hallway clear today. A forklift beeped somewhere near the loading dock. Somebody rolled a linen cart past the front of the stall, forcing two customers sideways into the tape line Denise had measured earlier. Nobody stopped them. The blue tape showed up the next morning. Not all at once. Just short strips across the tile near the east hallway, like somebody had started measuring traffic flow in the middle of the night and lost interest halfway through. I noticed it while dragging the tea urn out from under the counter. Ava stepped over one of the lines carrying dry noodles. Were these here yesterday? No. Did Denise do this? I looked toward the management office at the end of the corridor. Door closed, lights off, probably facilities. But I already knew it wasn't random. The tape curved wider around the bakery display racks and tightened again near my stall. By 10 o'clock, the hallway felt narrower, even though nothing had physically changed. People started reacting to the tape itself. Customers shifted sideways before reaching us. Delivery drivers stopped asking where they could leave boxes and started stacking them near the loading door instead. One florist from the center aisle moved her sign 6 inches back after staring at the floor for a full minute. Nobody mentioned the bulletin anymore. That somehow made it worse. Around lunchtime, Mr. Shu crossed over holding his coffee thermos. "You should probably keep your prep bins inside today." "They are inside." He glanced toward the corridor before lowering his voice. "I know. I'm saying the news has been taking pictures of what he lifted one shoulder. Traffic, congestion, whatever she calls it." Then he immediately drifted back toward his stall before another vendor reached the aisle. Ava watched him leave. Everybody's acting weird. I started rearranging sauce bottles near the register because I didn't have a better answer. The problem with Harbor Square was that nobody wanted open conflict. The vendors depended on each other too much for that. Shared deliveries, shared cold storage, shared cleanup crews. Even people who hated each other still borrowed extension cords. So when something turned political inside the building, everybody became careful at the same time. At 12:30, Denise walked through again with a clipboard tucked under one arm. This time she stopped near the pillar by the drink cooler and pointed toward the stack of produce trays waiting beside the counter. "How long are those staying there?" "We're still unloading. There's supposed to be 36 inches of clearance." "There is." She crouched slightly to eyeball the tape line without actually measuring it. A customer waiting for a pickup stepped backward to let two teenagers pass through the corridor. Denise noticed immediately. "See, that's exactly the kind of bottleneck we're trying to avoid." The customer looked embarrassed for reasons I don't think even he understood. After Denise left, Ava muttered something in Tagalog under her breath and shoved the produce trays farther under the counter than necessary. An hour later, our afternoon prep delivery arrived late because the driver said security redirected him behind the seafood section. New hallway rules, he told me while signing the invoice. Nobody explained them very clearly. We lost almost 40 minutes reorganizing ingredients around the delayed shipment. By 2:30, Ava had stopped talking entirely. I found her in the back hallway, counting remaining catering containers. "You okay?" She kept looking down at the box labels. "You think they're trying to get rid of us?" "No. You answered too fast." I started flattening cardboard beside the recycling cart. "We're fine," I said. "This stuff blows over." But even while I said it, two vendors passed us in the corridor and lowered their voices mid-conversation. One of them nodded at me politely without stopping. The other didn't look over at all. Later that evening, I checked the tenant board near the loading dock before locking up. A new notice had been pinned underneath the market calendar. East Hall Safety Review. Open tenant discussion. Thursday, 6:30 p.m. Attendance encouraged for all leaseholding vendors. There were already 3 signatures at the bottom showing board acknowledgement. Denise's was first. Somebody had circled the word encouraged in blue ink. Thursday morning started with a blocked exit. Not officially blocked. Just crowded enough that nobody would have wanted to carry something heavy through it. I noticed it while taking inventory near the back service corridor. 2 rolling linen carts sat half-parked beside the emergency push bar near the loading ramp. Somebody had also stacked folded banquet tables against the wall beside them. The exit sign above the door still glowed red through the clutter. Ava followed my line of sight. That wasn't there yesterday. I checked the hallway instinctively, expecting Denise to appear around the corner with her clipboard. Nobody did. "What's weird," Ava said quietly, "is nobody's freaking out about that." A seafood supplier pushed a hand truck past us a minute later without slowing down. One wheel clipped the banquet tables hard enough to shake them. Nobody moved them afterward. By lunch, the market felt divided into invisible zones. Vendors who usually wandered between stalls stayed near their own counters now. Conversations cut shorter whenever board members passed through the corridor. Even the maintenance staff seemed careful. Around noon, one of the janitors stopped outside my stall to refill the sanitizer station mounted near the pillar. Older guy named Luis. Worked there longer than almost anybody. He looked at the tape lines on the floor while replacing the bottle. "You know, they used to keep storage over there full time," he said. "Where?" He nodded toward the back service corridor. "Before the city complained." I looked up from the register. Complained about what Luis screwed the sanitizer cap on tighter than necessary. Fire exits, access space, something like that. "Who?" He gave a quick shrug. "Management, tenant board. Everybody blamed everybody else." Then he pushed the janitor cart farther down the hallway before I could ask more. The line for lunch pickup built faster than usual after 1:30. Probably because people wanted to grab food before the tenant meeting that evening. I overheard bits of conversation while sealing containers. "Just don't want lease trouble." Denise says insurance already got involved. Whole building's probably out of compliance anyway. Nobody lowered their voice enough. Ava stopped beside the register after hearing the last comment. You think any of that's true? I don't know. You've said that a lot this week. I started rearranging bottled drinks inside the cooler because it gave me something practical to look at. The frustrating part was that the rules themselves weren't fake. Hallways did have clearance requirements. Delivery congestion was real during lunch rush. If Denise had walked through the building with a camera long enough, she probably could have collected questionable photos from every vendor there. But somehow the pressure kept landing in one direction. Around 3, I carried empty stock boxes toward recycling and past the west corridor near the butcher section. 3 display racks sat halfway inside the walkway. Nobody had taped their floor. Nobody had posted notices. One of the racks actually blocked a fire extinguisher cabinet enough that I had to step sideways to see it. I stood there longer than I meant to. Not angry, exactly. More confused by how visible it all suddenly felt. A younger vendor from the candle kiosk noticed me staring. He lowered his voice immediately. I wouldn't take pictures. I wasn't. Still, he kept unpacking inventory while talking. She thinks you're challenging the board now. I haven't challenged anybody. Doesn't really matter. He said it casually, like he was explaining weather. Back at the stall, Ava was checking email orders on the tablet. Bayside moved next week's catering request to pending approval. What does that mean? They said they're waiting for the outcome of tonight's meeting. I took the tablet from her and reread the message twice, even though it only had 4 sentences. Near the bottom, somebody from facilities had taped another temporary sign beside the hallway entrance. Keep East Corridor clear during peak occupancy hours. The bakery racks were still outside their stall. A linen cart still blocked half the service exit. But 2 customers waiting near our counter stepped backward automatically. The second, Ava rolled out a prep bin. Later, while closing for the meeting, I noticed Denise near the management office talking quietly with 2 board members. She glanced toward my stall once, then toward the east hallway tape. Not nervous. Certain. That was the first moment the whole thing stopped feeling temporary. The tenant meeting wasn't until 6:30, but by 4 o'clock the market already felt off balance. Some vendors closed early, others stayed open but kept watch on the clock above the seafood counter like everybody was waiting for weather to hit. I was carrying broth containers into the walk-in cooler when I noticed the side service hallway door propped open with a cracked plastic bucket. That door usually stayed locked. Inside the maintenance corridor, lights buzzed unevenly overhead. Half the ceiling panels were stained from old leaks. Somebody had shoved folded chairs against the wall beside a stack of cardboard produce bins wrapped in caution tape. I probably wouldn't have stopped. Except I recognized one of the red inspection tags hanging from the pipe cage near the back. Same shape as the ones near the east exit. A maintenance worker I didn't know well was kneeling beside the utility panel, filling out something on a clipboard. He glanced up once when he heard my shoes on the concrete. "You lost snow." "Just looking for Luis." He already left. I nodded and started backing toward the hallway again. Then he looked at the inspection tag and said almost casually, "They never cleared half this stuff properly after the last warning." I stopped. What warning! The fire won. He tapped his pen against the clipboard. Before my time, though. I waited a second longer, expecting him to explain. He didn't. Back out in the market corridor, the normal sounds suddenly felt sharper than they had all week. Metal pans hitting prep tables, ice dumping into seafood bins, somebody dragging a hand truck too fast over tile. I walked past the east hallway again on my way back to the stall. The linen carts were gone now, but two locked storage cages near the loading corridor sat packed almost to the ceiling with folded display racks and unopened supply boxes. One had a printed tenant association label zip-tied to the side. Ava noticed me staring while she packed catering utensils. What nothing? You keep saying that too. I grabbed the stack of receipts she'd organized beside the register and pretended to check totals. The problem was that none of it actually clarified anything. Maybe the board had cleaned up violations already. Maybe Denise really was targeting our hallway because it stayed busier than the others. Maybe every vendor in the building was technically breaking some rule all the time, and I just never paid attention before this week. But the pressure kept circling back toward us while everybody else moved normally around it. Around 5:30, Mr. Yu crossed over holding 2 cups of coffee. He set one beside the register without sitting down. You going tonight? I kinda have to. He nodded once. Then he lowered his voice. If they ask questions, answer only what they ask. That sounds reassuring. I'm serious. He looked toward the management office before continuing. People get nervous when meetings become official. Official how? Instead of answering, he pointed subtly toward the tenant board near the loading dock. There was a new paper clipped beneath the safety meeting notice. City Fire Prevention Office attendance confirmed. No explanation underneath it. No name. Just the city seal stamped in blue ink near the bottom. Elva came around the counter and read it beside me. We'll think Denise called them probably. She seems pretty confident for somebody calling inspectors into her own building. I didn't answer right away. Down the corridor, Denise was speaking quietly with one of the board members near the florist kiosk. Calm posture. Clipboard tucked against her side again. A vendor pushing a produce. Dolly slowed when he saw the city notice right at once, then kept moving without saying anything. Another vendor took a picture of the paper with her phone before walking away. Nobody looked relieved. Half the board really believed they were fixing a safety issue. The atmosphere should have felt cleaner somehow. More settled. Instead, the whole building felt careful. Like everybody suddenly realized the meeting might not stay limited to one food stall. At 6:15, I started pulling the gate halfway down over the counter before heading upstairs. Ava handed me my folder with the catering contracts inside. You think they're actually trying to shut us down? I looked past her toward the taped hallway lines running through the market, past the bakery racks still sitting outside the west corridor, past the storage cages packed against the service wall. I honestly don't know what they're trying to do anymore. Then somebody upstairs started unfolding metal chairs for the meeting, one after another, the sound carrying all the way down through the market. The meeting room upstairs always smelled faintly like burnt coffee and dust. By the time Ava and I got there, most of the folding chairs were already filled. Vendors sat in small clusters instead of their usual mixed groups. The florist beside the window, the seafood suppliers near the back wall, bakery staff together near the aisle. Nobody waved us over. Denise stood near the front arranging papers into neat stacks beside a plastic pitcher of water. She looked more organized than nervous. A long folding table stretched across the front of the room for the tenant board. 3 members sat there, already reviewing packets under fluorescent lights that made everybody look tired. Near the far corner, a man in a Navy City jacket flipped through a thick binder alone. No board packet in front of him, no coffee. Just tabs sticking out from the sides of the binder in different colors. Ava leaned toward me. That him? Probably. We took seats near the side wall instead of the center rows. Easier to leave if things went bad. People kept glancing toward the city jacket without fully staring. At 6:30 sharp, Denise stood and cleared her throat. Thank you, everyone, for attending tonight's East Corridor Safety Review. Her tone had the same careful calm she used in the hallway. Professional enough that the meeting almost sounded routine at first. She started passing around printed photos. The packet she handed out looked thicker than I expected. Some of the pages had the same hallway photos attached with different dates printed underneath them. Most showed our lunch rush from awkward angles, delivery bins near the tape lines, customers clustered near the counter. One picture caught Ava pulling a prep cart around the pillar while somebody crossed behind her. This congestion creates liability exposure, Denise said, especially during peak occupancy. Nobody interrupted her. One board member nodded while flipping through the photos. Another kept glancing toward the city official like he wanted confirmation before reacting. Denise continued. We've also received concerns from tenants regarding emergency egress limitations and recurring obstruction patterns. Concerns, not complaints anymore. The wording had changed. I noticed it immediately. Ava shifted beside me. She's making it sound bigger. I kept watching the room. Mr. Shu sat near the back with his arms folded tightly across his chest. The candle vendor from the west corridor avoided eye contact completely. Somebody near the doorway quietly moved their chair farther from ours during the presentation. Denise placed another photo onto the table. For comparison, she said other vendors have generally remained compliant after hallway adjustments were introduced. The city official finally looked up from his binder. Not at us. At the board table. Sorry, he said. Can I see that last photo again? Denise blinked once, then handed it over. He studied it for several seconds. That card in the background, he said. What corridor is that? The East Service Corridor. No, he said calmly. That's West. Nobody at the board table corrected him. One of the bakery staff slowly lowered her complaint packet onto the table. Near the back wall, somebody finally stopped taking photos. The room shifted slightly after that. Not dramatically. Just enough movement to feel people recalculating something internally. Denise smiled politely. I may have mixed up 1 or 2 labels during printing. The official nodded once and opened his binder. You're Denise Ralston, correct? Yes. You oversee shared storage approvals for tenant overflow. One of the board members looked toward her immediately. Denise adjusted the papers in front of her before answering. The committee handles most of that jointly. The official flipped to another tab. We've had unresolved clearance warnings tied to West Corridor storage since February. Nobody spoke. The fluorescent lights hummed louder now that the room had gone still. Denise straightened slightly. Those issues were already being addressed internally, not according to the re-inspection notes. He slid a document across the table toward the board members. Nobody touched it at first. A vendor near the back quietly stood and walked out into the hallway without saying anything. One board member finally picked up the paper. The expression on his face didn't collapse into shock or outrage. Just irritation mixed with the kind of tiredness people get when they realize a problem is suddenly bigger than expected. The official continued flipping pages. Blocked service exits, unapproved storage overflow, temporary corridor narrowing. He glanced up briefly. Some of these photos appear to involve the same West Corridor your committee signed off on in March. Nobody looked toward my stall anymore. People started looking at the board table instead. Even Denise stopped organizing the papers in front of her. One of the seafood vendors quietly pulled his chair farther away from the aisle and stopped taking notes altogether. Denise kept her voice controlled. Our concern tonight is still East Corridor congestion during lunch operations. The official nodded. And we'll get there. Not an aggressive. Somehow worse. One of the board members leaned back in his chair and rubbed both hands over his face. Another quietly asked, "Do we need legal review before continuing this?" Nobody answered immediately. Ava looked at me once like she expected relief. I mostly felt tired, because even with the room changing around us, nobody sounded supportive. Careful, yes. Nervous, definitely. But not supportive. The city official closed the binder halfway. At minimum, he said, I'd recommend postponing lease-related recommendations until the full compliance review is complete. That landed harder than anything else he'd said all night. Not because people disagreed. Because nobody seemed surprised. The tape lines changed again the following Monday. Facilities replaced the old blue strips with wider yellow markers, and the board posted a new notice near the loading dock. Committee review pending. No additional explanation underneath it. Ava read the notice while holding 2 coffees and asked if Denise was gone. I looked across the corridor at the bakery racks finally pushed back inside their boundary line. I think everybody's trying not to become the next meeting. After that, people mostly stopped bringing the review up near the front corridors. Facilities never removed the yellow hallway markers after the inspectors left. By the end of the month, the tenant board had replaced half the old storage rules with temporary clearance policies nobody seemed fully happy about. Denise stopped running the safety meetings after the review started, although her name still appeared on a few old notices near the loading corridor with strips of white tape covering the signature line. Nobody talked about the east hallway the same way anymore. During lunch, rush vendors moved carts automatically when maintenance walked through. People checked the floor markings before unloading deliveries. Even the bakery finally kept their racks inside the painted boundary lines. One afternoon, Mr. Shu crossed over for coffee while I was reorganizing catering invoices near the register. "You were right to keep records," he said quietly. I looked up from the paperwork. "I didn't really do anything." He gave a small shrug. "Still changed things." Then he went back across the corridor before the lunch line started building again. Ava was rewriting the lunch specials board near closing when a maintenance worker stopped to replace one of the temporary hallway notices with a laminated version screwed directly into the wall. The old paper curled at the corners while he pulled it down. Nobody said anything while he worked. The maintenance worker tightened the last screw, stepped back once to look at the sign, then left the tape lines the way they already were.